Hi everyone, this is Alex Theodorou, and you're listening to the Startup Sit Down.
Hey everyone, Alex here. I am super excited to be here alongside an amazing guest today. Her name is Dr. Ellen Cullen. She is an occupational therapist with over 30 years of experience in various clinical settings. In addition to her school-based practice, she also owns Just Grow Play, LLC, of course, and a product development and consultation business. She is passionate about how occupational therapists, as design thinkers and coaches, can ignite innovation and occupational justice at the individual, group, and community levels. So please, everyone, join us. Thank Ellen for being here, and Ellen, thank you for being here as well.
Alex, thank you so much for having me and for giving me a platform to speak about my passion for occupational therapy.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what I typically ask, all guests on the show is tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming, in this case, an occupational therapist.
Well, as I've been thinking about my journey as an OT, I feel like I was destined to find occupational therapy somehow, some way. And for me, it did start back in high school. Surprisingly, I remember walking into the career center. In high school, we were all charged with having to go to the career center and figure out what we were going to do after high school. And I remember the kind, wonderful woman who worked in the career center. She said to me, "Ellen, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be a nurse. I've always wanted to be a nurse. I'm going to be a nurse." And she said, "Oh, Ellen, well, that's great, but it's kind of boring. Don't you want to be something a little more exciting, like an occupational therapist?" I said, "Oh, what's an occupational therapist?" And she said, "Well, I think you'd really like the field. I'm going to set you up with an OT to shadow." And I said, "Okay." So I remember shadowing a pediatric occupational therapist, and this was well, I'm going to date myself here, but it was the early 80s. And I remember shadowing a pediatric occupational therapist who was going into someone's home doing sensory integration therapy. And it was fascinating. I didn't even know there was an option to play and interact with families like that. It intrigued me, but I kept on my path to being a nurse, but I tucked that memory away. Then I worked as a nurse's aide between my freshman and sophomore year in college, and found myself going to the OT department at the local community hospital here in Rochester, New York. And the OTs were fascinating to me. They said, "Yeah, we allow our clients to choose what they want to be working on, choose what matters to them." And it blew my mind. I was so used to, as a nurse, like doing unto someone. The thought of having a client choose the path they want to work on in a healthcare setting was really it blew me away. So yeah, at that point on, I remember switching my major, and then I did graduate with a bachelor's in OT. So yeah, the rest is history. I love being an OT. So that's kind of my journey. Have no regrets. No regrets.
Amazing. Well, thank you. That's wonderful to hear, and I'm sure resonates with many of the people that listen or will be listening to this episode. And I think it's wonderful to how each of us kind of have our own we stumble almost into each of these different professions in some ways, and I think it's amazing, and it's almost serendipitous in many ways how that always comes together. So I think one thing that I'm particularly interested about, partly in the work that we do, but also in the deep experience that you've done working with children and youth, at least more recently, I know I'm sure you've had a great breadth of experience working in different clinical capacities, but where do you see the role of innovation in specifically pediatric therapy now? And I know coming from it, someone who works in the school board, I think it'd be great to kind of share a little bit, shine a light on what you think about that, the role of innovation specifically with children.
Yes, well, I think, as OTs and as I'd like to think OTs are occupational designers as well, that we do design for people. So as we're looking at designing for pediatrics, keeping that client, that pediatric client, at the center of what we do, the why of what we do, and what we dream about for those children, and what their dream is at the center of what we do. I think that's the most important thing. And then collaborating as a interprofessional team to make that dream happen, and finding like-minded people to make those innovations happen. And giving a voice to children and their caregivers and, stakeholders who are involved with bringing innovation to life for children. I think that's really the crux of it. And as OTs, I think we're natural designers and empathetic to we started empathy. What are those clients' needs? And I think pediatrics is important. We need to give a voice to those students and involve them in their in designing for them. They're really at the center of the why and what we do.
Yeah. And how did you make the shift? Were you always working in kind of the role of pediatrics, or did that happen more recently? I know as OTs, at least in my experience with many of the professionals we work with, and have the pleasure of working around and learning from. One big thing is how the exposure that they get, but not only from different disciplines and different fields. Like, how did you end up in this working with children?
Well, I always had an interest in wanting to work with children. But it's interesting. I started out my career in geriatrics, and funny, I find quite a few similarities in those two populations. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of adults who still like to play, and children like to play. But there's something about play and the joy and wonderment of childhood that's very appealing to everyone, I think, in their life. So the joy that children have is just very appealing and attractive to me. So I have worked with adults, but then getting into pediatrics has always been something that brings me such joy. So I ended up, um, you know, always being in that sphere and being attracted to that area. So I have worked in all areas of OT, but boy, working with children, I find there's nothing like it. Keeps me young.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think that leads me kind of what I was thinking next, which is, you know, our initial conversations, at least on LinkedIn, which I love LinkedIn for, I meet amazing people such as yourself. But I think one of the really cool things that, made me fascinated and why I wanted you to be on this episode was particularly looking about the role of innovation.
Hmm.
And I know part of Just Grow Play, part of that, if I'm not mistaken, is the idea for the invention of Peg and the Egg, which, has a fun kind of catchy name to it. But I'd love to hear maybe from you, you know, where did that come from, and who's it helping and why?
Oh, it just brings a smile to my face. I'm lucky to work in a very innovative school district who has had the opportunity to partner with a local college. And at that local college, there are designers and engineers, and they're always wanting to get their hands on kids to try out some of their products. So I had the opportunity with my OT department where I work to try out one of their designs. And then I shared with them something I came up with. And they kind of said, Ellen, you need to get that into the hands of kids. And I said, oh, I just came up with it because I was charged with pushing into gen ed classrooms and I wanted something appealing to kids. So that's what I did. I walked in with an Easter basket full of eggs and, the kids' eyes light up. And it really was teachers who told me, Ellen, I need something quick. These kids are coming in without the fine motor skills they need to use kindergarten tools. Parents were telling me, my kids don't have the fine motor skills to do things like writing and cut and handle their backpacks and zippers. So I said, okay, I got to appeal to a lot of people, but I took a little bit of therapy and a little plastic peg and I put it in an egg and had all the kids laying on their belly. And with that peg and putty, the kids were creating peg volcanoes and peg people, and they couldn't get enough of it. And in the hallway, kids were saying, Miss Cullen, when are you coming in with peg and the egg? And I'm like, oh, peg and the egg. So it's fun. I mean, the kids also use it as a self-regulation tool. So it's just something that worked for me. It worked for teachers, worked for parents, especially the kids had fun. They were playing. And then teachers are saying, wow, I could use this. I could integrate this with my ELA curriculum. I can teach concepts of directionality. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. So I think, you know, it really came down to the light in the kids' eyes when they saw me come in with a basket of eggs. They weren't, for them, they're learning, but they're playing. And I think, what a joy that is to use the occupational play to help them grow. And So that's kind of where it came from. And then I said, well, why not get it into the hands of more kids? So I looked at ways I could make that peg work in a number of different ways and go through that design process and have the kids be my user testers and have teachers and parents take a look at it. And it's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about you mentioned briefly about that they use it as almost a self-regulation tool. Uh, what like I have some ideas, but like maybe could you tell us a little bit about like what like for our listeners, like what exactly does this kind of initially simple yet robust kind of resource, how can this serve as a way to regulate yourself in any way? So I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, it's an interesting tool because I myself, like even during Zoom meetings or just when I'm thinking or trying to create, I find myself like holding putty. I always have a little putty by my computer, and I was like, oh, I need a fidget tool to go along with that putty. That there was something very satisfying using like a pencil type stamper device, and then you know it's just a lot of fun, but it also served as a very calming tool. And I thought there's many tactile qualities and sensory qualities to using putty with the tool. So it's a wonderful thing. And I've noticed students doing it as well. So, the students are using it in many ways. And I think that's wonderful that they can actually create with it what they need it to be for themselves. So I see kids being very creative with it. And that brings me a lot of joy.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's amazing that you really premised a lot of the work that you do, and even the creations that you put forward. Always at the center of it is fun, and I think that's really what we need, in our life, whether it be 5 or 90 years old, right? So I think it's a really important thing to do, and I really think that it really contributes to that sticking factor of not only the product itself being used, but also the consistency of it. Because I think with anything, like as I'm sure you're aware, in therapy in general, the more you put into it and the more consistent you are in something, the better and the more lasting the outcomes. And so I think that's it's a really work and that you see that in all aspects of life, but
Mhm.
especially in the context of care,
Right.
especially in those formative stages of a person's life, right? Being through a child, through adolescence, and so forth. So that
Absolutely.
absolutely, yeah. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts though on kind of putting on that business hat now after wearing an OT hat for so many years. How do you find that's been for you? Like, what's that been like? Is there any sort of things that stand out to you in doing that, or how's that look?
Yes, I found myself really having to reach outside the OT world to develop skills that I really was lacking. In OT school, and certainly I did go on for a master's degree, and there was a course in how to be an entrepreneurial educator, and then in my doctoral work there was a entrepreneurial OT course, but it was really centered on owning your own OT clinic. And I thought, oh, but OTs are expanding into different areas. So I had to find mentors in those certain areas to help me, designers, engineers, lawyers, marketing people. And I really had to read and study to supplement my lack of knowledge in those areas. And I think I didn't realize really if what I was getting into, but I have a passion for what I believe in and what I feel kids need, and I think that has helped me persevere. Um, yeah, and I'm real fortunate to have had solid, wonderful people as mentors because you can't do anything like this alone. And I'm real thankful for those people who have helped me.
Amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, and it is certainly a journey. I think
Yeah,
you said it best, but I think it's amazing that I think the adaptability and the resilience above all is really what I'm hearing here, right? And I think that's
yes,
super important in anything you do. And if you want this, like if you know the world would be a better place with your product, with your service, with your experience, it's almost like things will move in the direction you need it to if you just kind of keep that singular focus, and stay kind of almost like monomaniacally focused on that one kind of thought. And I think it's incredible, to kind of
Yeah.
see this, coming forward. So uh, the one thing that I'd love for to hear is there any sort of stories of transformation or support that you've been able to provide in introducing this peg in the egg kind of creation, or how has augmenting maybe play in some way? How has that augmenting play? How has that been, particularly, fruitful for children in the course of the services that you're providing? So, do you have any stories of kind of anything interesting that came up in that process? I'd love to hear that.
Oh, kids have been the best teachers ever. They're amazing. I think every design team should have the inspiration of children. I think they see the world in such a curious, innovative way, just naturally, and their joy is just contagious. Interestingly enough, I have had amazing stories from parents and teachers who have used my product, but I'll tell you, just recently I had a chance to be an innovator in a school district program, and that I was charged with being a leader in our school district to do a summer program. So I started a program for English as a new language students who are entering kindergarten. And I would say, even though I wasn't specifically treating students as an OT, I was using my OT skills to put on a program, develop an innovative program based on play to develop skills. And a parent came up to me and said, "I just want to let you know your program changed my child's life." And I'd heard stories about that from a product I developed, but I think when you hear that with another innovation, in this case, I developed for an individual and a group and at the community level. But to hear a parent tell me that, I, for me as an OT, that just it meant a lot to me, and it was the great team that I had that we were able to commit to a mission and what we believed in terms of our wanting to close that gap for these students entering our schools. So that for me was made the whole process worth it. And again, we're going to rework it. Our initial prototype we rolled out this summer. We're going to rework that and make some improvements for next year. But I think being flexible, open to change, and trying to meet the needs of the community that we're in, and to meet the needs of kids, their families, that just means the world to me.
Amazing. And so, what is next for the company, for the product? Where is this going? Is there anything you want to maybe shine a little sneak peek on, a little spotlight
Oh,
on? Where's it headed?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I just love creating and designing, and so you'll see I do have a website. On that website, we just put up a fun game that parents can use with their child, and teachers can use, and kids can play with each other. So that's new, but I'd also like to add more content to that website, but also I am patent pending as well on a putty board. So there's some new ideas coming out along those lines. So, but yeah, intellectual property has come a long way. So that's another area that's I've learned a lot about. And I'd encourage any OT to learn a lot about that with any innovations they're putting out there. So yeah, so you can be looking forward to some new items, new products with Peg in the Egg. I'd also like to at some point sell these individually on my website. Right now, you can buy them in bulk. So yeah, but thank you for allowing me to speak about my passion. It truly
Um,
is.
Incredible, incredible. And I think the last thing I wanted to ask that I feel like many of us would love to know is there anything that you could advise to any other OTs or clinicians with an idea or innovation?
Wow, I think OTs are ready, very innovative, very creative. And I think if they can see within themselves that they not only can have a seat at a design table, I believe they're integral members of design teams. I think it's real important for OTs to see themselves as having the chance to make a difference. That we can put out products, we can be innovators, and we can consider ourselves innovators. We don't always have to leave it up to someone else, that we can do that. So more and more you're seeing OTs really owning that potential within themselves to be change agents for the clients that they serve. It starts with empathy. I truly believe that. And I think OTs naturally have that ability through how we've been trained. We're very holistic in our focus, but we have the ability to tell another person's story. And I think that's where good design and innovation starts. We're really, trying to design for others and reduce barriers and unlock another person's potential. And I think, wow, what a gift our profession is, and innovative in itself. So you go, OTs. I think we already have what it takes. It's just giving ourselves permission to go for it and surround ourselves with like-minded people and access mentors.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ellen. That was super, super helpful. And I'm sure many others will love it just the same. And thank you for the amazing work that you do and for being a guest on today's episode. So thanks again for everything. And yeah, I would look forward to staying in touch. And I'm sure we'll share some of the great content and information that you've been talking about on our social media posts as well. For anyone else interested or who wants to know more, they can get in touch with you and check it out for themselves.
Great. Thanks again, Alex. And thank your listeners.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.